Good morning. I'm Rick Newman, host of the American Museum of Tort Law video series. I'm the executive director at the museum, and I'm very pleased to welcome our guest today, James Zirin, attorney, author, and philanthropist. Jim is a graduate of Princeton and went to the University of Michigan School of Law, a good school, although not as good as the University of Wisconsin, where I went to law school. I had to throw that
Well,
in.
not far away.
In any event, Jim worked as an assistant United States attorney in Manhattan under Robert Morgenthau, a legendary prosecutor, and was then a partner in the law firm of Breed, Abbott, and Morgan before joining Sidley and Austin, working on transactional and litigation matters. He is a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, past chair of its International Law Committee, is a trustee of the Asia Society, and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Jim is the author of 3 books. One, The Mother Court, was a history of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. 2, Supremely Partisan, a look at how politics affects the Supreme Court of the United States. And then in September 2019, Jim published the book which we are primarily concerned with today, Plaintiff in Chief, a portrait of Donald Trump in 3,500 lawsuits. Here are some quotes and excerpts about this book, and particularly about Donald Trump. He sees law not as a system of rules to be obeyed and ethical ideas to be respected, but as a weapon to be used against his adversaries or a hurdle to be sidestepped when it gets in his way. If you partner with Donald Trump, you will probably wind up litigating with him. If you enroll in his university or buy one of his apartments, chances are you will want your money back. If you are a woman and you get too close to him, you may need to watch your back. If you try to sue him, he's likely to defame you. If you make a deal with him, you had better get it in writing. If you are a lawyer, an architect, or even his dentist, you'd better get paid up front. If you venture an opinion that publicly criticizes him, you may be sued for libel. Jim, let me ask you the leading threshold question. Has there ever been a president like this one for the use and or misuse of lawsuits, civil litigation as a weapon?
Well, I guess you'd have to say that he is what the lawyers call sui generis. There never has been a president like this. Litigation is his stock and trade. He lived by it as a businessman. It's a great predictor of how he's behaved in office. It's a complete misconception of the adversary system, why it's there, what it's for. It was designed by the British as the best way to get to the truth. We adopted it. It's different from civil law countries that don't have the adversary system, but he uses the adversary system as a method of destroying people who would frustrate his objectives, avoiding his just debts, and sidestepping his legal obligations.
Well, your title talks about 3,500 lawsuits, although by some accounts, he has been involved in more than that. So let me ask you, we are the American Museum of Tort Law. Is Trump a tort?
Well, it's a very interesting question because I'd never thought of a tort as being a person before. A tort is a civil wrong. It's perhaps it's an act of misconduct, which is redressable or remediable under the law. But Trump is a tort. It's the tort of lying. According to the Washington Post, he has now lied 20,000 times to the American people since he's been in office, demonstrably lied. And he has a tendency to lie. He loves lying, and he lies when there's no reason to lie, and he just makes it up as he goes along. And of course, in a president and a national leader, and indeed in an international leader, that is a wrong, and that is a tort. So in a very real sense, Trump is a tort.
How does he use or misuse the legal system? Perhaps you could lead in with a mention of his mentor, Roy Cohn.
Roy Cohn was an unscrupulous lawyer. He was eventually disbarred just a few weeks before he died of AIDS. He was someone who had shown he could beat the system. He was counsel to Senator McCarthy during the McCarthy hearings. He smeared people. He was totally unscrupulous, and he was indicted 3 times by my late boss, Robert M. Morgenthau, and he was acquitted 3 times. In one of the major cases where he was acquitted, he had another lawyer who conveniently complained of chest pains just before he was to sum up, and Trump summed up in his own behalf, having never taken the stand. In fact, Trump never took the stand, Cohn never took the stand in any of the 3 indictments. And he was able to sum up to the jury and get his personality across to the jury without ever being cross-examined. So when he met Trump in a bar in 1973, a darkened bar, and Trump was looking around for a lawyer, Trump thought he was a natural because this was a lawyer who could beat the system. Trump was faced with a race discrimination lawsuit involving himself and his father, discrimination in housing. It was an open and shut case. Other lawyers advised him to settle the case, and Cohn advised him to fight the case. Fight, fight, fight. And Trump liked that advice. So for 3 years, Trump fought the case. Eventually, he settled the case, as the other lawyers had advised him to do. Without admitting or denying that he engaged in race discrimination. He agreed not to do it in the future. The only thing that happened in those 3 years were, number one, Cohn counterclaimed against the government for $100 million. And the lawsuit, of course, was dismissed, but it was designed really to set the government lawyers back on their heels, wondering whether they should have brought the case in the first place. So it was the value of counterattack, the tactic of counterattack that Cohn taught Trump, and Trump liked that. And the other stratagem that Cohn employed was to try to undermine the prosecutors, question their motives, question their tactics, say it was a witch hunt, say that they were engaging in Gestapo-like tactics. They were stormtroopers. And these are Justice Department lawyers. One of them eventually became a respected state court judge in California. But their reputations were smeared by Cohn. In the course of the lawsuit, eventually the judge held a hearing and exonerated the lawyers. So you see, all that happened in 3 years was, number one, they brought a counterclaim which was dismissed. Number two, they questioned the integrity of the government lawyers who brought the case. There was a hearing and the lawyers were exonerated, and then they settled the case. And Trump, of course, claimed victory, and Cohn claimed victory, because that was another tactic. No matter what happens to you, you, number one, claim you're more sinned against than sinning, to quote King Lear. And number two, you declare victory and go home, no matter what the outcome is.
Right. Yeah, I read somewhere that the rules are, if you're charged with anything, counterattack, try to undermine your adversary, work the press, lie. It doesn't matter how tall a tale it is, but repeat it again and again. And then finally, settle the case, claim victory, and go home. Is that a fair summary?
That's how he would behave. In fact, in the race discrimination case, the day after Cohn was retained, they held a press conference and denounced the government and announced that they were bringing the counterclaim.
Yeah. So he has been variously accused by a number of women of sexual assault or inappropriate touching, inappropriate sexual conduct. And I know that there are at least two lawsuits against him, one by Summer Zervos and another by E. Jean Carroll for defamation. Uh, E. Jean Carroll had accused him of sexually assaulting her, and he responded by denying that he knew her and saying words to the effect that she wasn't his type. So she sued him for defamation. Do you know what's going on with those cases?
Well, at the moment, both of them are kind of on hold because both plaintiffs have sought discovery, and Trump claimed that he could not be subjected to civil discovery, particularly in a state court suit. They're both in the New York state courts while he was president. Well, the Supreme Court had decided against him previously in the Clinton-Jones case, Clinton v. Jones, and or Jones v. Clinton, whichever way you want to look at it. And that was reaffirmed in Trump v. Vance, which was the effort of the New York County District Attorney Cyrus Vance to subpoena his financial records and his tax returns. And it's clear now that, if it weren't clear before, that even with a conservative Supreme Court, the president is not above the law, is not immune from a civil action arising out of personal conduct, particularly pre-presidential conduct, which in both of these cases it was, and that the civil cases could go forward.
So we can expect those to proceed?
Yes, they're both up on appeal, and the Supreme Court, I think, effectively destroyed most of Trump's arguments, and so we'll see what the New York state courts say. In the Paula Jones case, of course, the federal judge ordered Clinton to submit to a deposition and to submit to other forms of discovery. And it's more than likely that Trump will have to do the same, whether he's reelected or not.
So I guess my final two questions are, what is the strategy to hold him accountable? And what does the future hold, in your view, for this president?
I think that the ultimate strategy, because it's only a few months away, is to vote him out of office. Once he's out of office, he's going to be vulnerable to indictment, both federal indictment and state indictment. Remains to be seen what will happen with those cases or possible cases. If he's reelected, there's the possibility of impeachment arising out of the abuse of power in the case of extending clemency to Roger Stone, who said he had incriminating evidence against Trump, and whether that is an abuse of power. And there may be other instances, having his Justice Department discontinue the case or try to discontinue the case against Michael Flynn after Flynn had twice pleaded guilty. So there are other high crimes and misdemeanors that he may have committed in office beside the Ukraine affair, which was the subject of the last impeachment proceeding. Mm-hmm. If he's not reelected, that conduct may involve an charge of obstruction of justice in the state courts. And then, of course, there's the possibility of state prosecutions for tax fraud, for false statements, and for other forms of financial fraud, which the district attorney, Cyrus Vance, is pursuing.
Interesting. So this is an example of a president who has stretched the notion of integrity, stretched the use of the legal system really to the breaking point. There's never been anything like this, has there?
No, there's never been anything like this, and and I think the founders of our country, in their genius, having a system of checks and balances and three branches of government, which had various co-equal responsibilities and also oversight responsibilities with respect to one another, that they never conceived of a president like Donald Trump, of a rogue president like Donald Trump. And it's taken a while for the branches of government, the legislative branch, the Congress, particularly shameful vote of the Senate, in my view, in failing to convict him of high crimes and misdemeanors along partisan lines when the evidence was so overwhelming of an abuse of power. And the Supreme Court, in going so slowly, which is sort of typical of the judiciary. Hamlet talked about the law's delay. It's been with us for a long time. And that plays right into the hands of someone like Trump, who uses delaying tactics and distraction in order to avoid having to pay the piper.
Right. Do you think that the Trump presidency has caused lasting damage either to the institution of the presidency or to the entire system of government?
I don't think it's lasting. I hope it's not lasting. I think it's taught us a great deal about presidential conduct, about the independence of the Justice Department, about what the judiciary should be doing to rein in a rogue president. If we have a rogue president, it seems to happen not often, thank God, but when it does, the other branches of government have to be responsive. After all, it was Justice Scalia who said that it's not the Bill of Rights that protects our liberties. Any banana republic can have a Bill of Rights. What really protects our liberties is the separation of powers, so that we don't have a man on horseback, so that we don't have abuse by any of the branches of government, that the other branches can take them to task. Now, in this case, the separation of powers fell short because of the Republican domination of the United States Senate, and also their willingness, since they lived by Trump, to die by Trump, and not to be senators who were profiles in courage and thought of the Constitution first and party second. I mean, it's John F. Kennedy who said sometimes party loyalty demands too much. Well, it demanded a great deal in the case of Donald Trump and the senators, particularly Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and others in the Republican coterie who really failed to recognize that you had a rogue president.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens in November. And until then, I think these lawsuits that he is defending will continue. And I suspect he'll continue to file lawsuits. It's what he does. He lies and he sues.
Well, he's filed, interestingly enough, he's filed lawsuits since he's been in office. He's sued people for libel and filed other lawsuits. And yet he claims in the E. Jean Carroll case that he can't be distracted with discovery in a civil lawsuit that's brought against him. So the argument really doesn't wash very well.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate your coming and talking with me this morning. It's really been a pleasure. I will arrange to send you a copy of this once it's all edited.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd love to see the link, and I look forward to seeing it.
Good. Thanks again. Bye.
Yes. Glad to be with you. Bye-bye.